what's important for any organization to realize is that this is not an IT issue. This is not something that, we just leave this to the guys in IT to take care of and make sure that they are owning this and keeping the defenses up and maintaining the defensive perimeter. It's important to understand that this is actually a cultural issue, and that if we know that as many as or as high as 88% of breaches are the result of a human error, then we know that everyone is a stakeholder in prevention, and that that doesn't mean that they all have to be technical subject matter experts. They don't all have to be wizards at information technology, but they do need to have an awareness of cyber risk issues, and so that's part of the education process, and really an organization that is not embarking on an education program is really leaving themselves vulnerable. A comprehensive risk management program is multifaceted. It involves a series of building out defenses that need to be built and maintained. It's important to be able to detect and analyze an event. You got to be able. You've got to prepare for. One of the ways to think about it really is in the same way that we act to protect a physical entity or physical structure. We've got perimeter defenses. And we can go back to an example of some elaborate castle, and it's on a hillside, so you've got elevation, and so they got to come up, and then you've got a moat and a castle wall, and then you've got another set of walls, and then you've got et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, until finally somewhere in the center of all of that are the keys to the kingdom or the essential crown jewels. The more difficult that any organization makes it for a threat actor to engage, the more likely they're going to pass your organization by. It's a burglar's going to, if they find an open window, they're going to come in. If they know that there's a powerful security system and a great big dog, they're probably going to walk by and go to the more vulnerable target. And it's the same with threat actors around cybersecurity. There are some very formal methods and frameworks. The National Institutes of Standards and Technology, NIST, cybersecurity framework, is one of the fundamental tools that organizations across certainly the U.S. and elsewhere use to establish a cybersecurity program. It's a very formalized program that an organization can follow in implementing a comprehensive cybersecurity program across their organization. Many organizations will look at a minimum a quarterly training program where you have some kind of reminder. It's usually set up, and there are certainly vendors available to do that. It's usually set up as a on-demand, maybe 20, 30, 40, 60-minute training endeavor that individual employees will take, and they'll be reminded to do it, and they'll do it on regular intervals. As I say, quarterly is good because it keeps it front and center. There's other options that it can be factored into things like safety meetings, toolbox meetings. There can be special training, lunch and learns, webinars. There's all kinds of methods, delivery tools that are available, but certainly keeping some form of training regular, keeping the conversation alive, and maintaining it within that cultural sort of environment is really important to the organizations. There should be ways of monitoring the effectiveness of your perimeter defenses. There are things available that outside parties can do, things like penetration testing, where they can actually determine that your defenses are holding and doing what they're meant to do. And then, of course, another important aspect is certainly understanding it's not enough to just build the defenses. You also need to understand when you're being probed or when you're under attack. There's got to be a way of identifying an attack, analyzing just how the depth of potential penetration. There's got to be a way of containing that attack or that penetration, and eradicating it, getting it. You've got to be able to recover your systems, make sure that there's no damage. You've got to be able to determine if there is damage, how extensive that damage is, and then you've got to be able to remediate that and recover from that, and then learn from that. So there's got to be some form of post-incident analysis or recovery. It's when you and then, of course, like all things in risk management, it's a cyclical process. It's not a one and done. Yeah, we looked at it. We have a system in place. It's got to be something that is constantly renewed and refreshed, because certainly the threat environment is not static. It's changing all of the time. So we need to be sure that the defenses that we have are current and that they're in place. Well, data suggests that at least in the first half of 2019, data breaches exposed in excess of 4.1 billion records, and third-party violations accounted for over half of all data breaches. So it's at least in the United States. So it's very important that we are not just trusting our third-party vendors at face value, but that we're actually incorporating some sort of third-party risk management program, which really should be something of a discipline within any organization, and it should be focused on analyzing and controlling risks associated with outsourcing activities to third-party vendors and external service providers. And because we know that third-party vendors could, there's a number of areas that they could have an impact on our business, certainly financial, reputational, legal and regulatory impacts, as well as operational impacts, where they can actually disrupt and interrupt our ability to continue and maintain operations. So that should not be done on a case-by-case basis, and certainly in the environment of home builders, and where sometimes there can be a lot of trust-based relationships that we've been doing business together the same way, or my dad did business with your dad, and et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes we can lapse into relationships or an informality that could ultimately blow up and cause damage. So it's important for an organization, regardless of its size, to establish as I say, a vendor risk assessment framework. Got to be able to ask the important questions about what a third-party vendor does, how they what they do with data, how do they collect, store, transmit, process, and dispose of sensitive data. What activities do they engage in that could have an impact on your organization, and so it's important to define a framework and then be prepared to hold a third-party vendor accountable to that framework, and ensure that that they are meeting all of the requirements that you set out for them in terms of data protection and security. Too many business owners make the mistake of thinking that that A, they don't need to have cyber coverage, or B, that their cyber coverage is going to be covered under some sort of crime policy that they might have, or under some other component. But excuse me, it's very important for an organization to understand that they need to have a comprehensive cyber policy that is developed for them by a specifically trained and knowledgeable insurance partner who really understands cyber coverage. It's not just a simple add-on to a policy. It's a very cyber policies have become extremely comprehensive, and in many cases they can be quite challenging. It can actually be challenging to get coverage because vendors, insurance carriers are imposing a greater level of control and requirements for organizations to implement before they will issue a policy. So there's a certain number of absolute must-haves that insurance carriers are beginning to look for from their potential clients. Things like intrusion detection and prevention solutions, like we talked about earlier, endpoint protection solutions, multi-factor authentication, email filtering systems, and comprehensive data backup facilities and intervals. So insurance companies are going to be asking questions about all of those things. They're also going to be they may ask for evidence of a cybersecurity incident response plan. They may be looking for aspects of network segmentation. There's a number of more sophisticated controls that they may be asking for with more sophisticated companies. But the absence of any one of those controls can sometimes lead to a denial of coverage. So, and sometimes carriers will be looking for evidence that those controls have been in place for a period of time. So they're not just implemented the day before we start shopping for policy. They're really looking for evidence of that cybersecurity awareness and that culture of protection and awareness that we talked about a little bit earlier.